Hello world, welcome back to the PocketGamer.biz podcast with your hosts, myself, Brian Baglow, and the magnificent monetisation mistress, Miss Peggy Ann Salts. Hello Peggy, how are you today?
I have to say I love that one, Brian, because that's what we're talking about. We're also talking about monetization, so I don't know if that was planned, but it comes together so well. Brilliant, brilliant brain that you have, Brian.
Well, thank you, Peggy. I know there's a reason they keep asking me back outside the fabulous wardrobes, so it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm really looking forward to this afternoon session because it's something that I'm personally interested in. We've got a fantastic guest lined up.
And it couldn't literally be better timing. And I'm also passionate about this because I'm always in favor of whatever levels the playing field, removes friction, democratizes access. And that's what we have today because we have Chris Hewish. He's president and interim CEO of Xsolla, which we all know is the game commerce platform and company. But it's also about working on the side of the gamer because you might not know it, but in addition to being at the helm of Xsolla, right, Chris is also himself. He founded two other companies, including games companies. He is a gamer. He's wanting to build something here for the gaming audience, and that's what we have him here to tell us about that today.
Hello, Chris. Welcome on board.
Thank you. Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Brian. I am thrilled to be here. As you mentioned, I'm a lifelong gamer. I've been in this business my entire career and really have seen a lot of the different business models that have come and gone over the years, and truly am a believer in trying to help developers and publishers connect directly with their players, whether it's around the gameplay or the community, or even in this case from the seat here at Xsolla around the business of games. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of the trends that we're seeing and, really espouse why I think this is so important for anybody who's running a games business.
Thank you so much, Chris. Well, for the purposes of today's podcast, I'm going to be the developer who's maybe not who's seen the name, who have come across you at maybe one of the many events that you do, but isn't quite sure of Xsolla and what it is you do. So, for the benefit of me as the young and naive developer, can you tell us a little more about the company and what it is that you do?
Absolutely, Brian. So Xsolla has been around now for over 18 years. And simply put, what we do, our mission is to bring all of the tools and solutions that any game developer or publisher would need to go direct to their players. And that means going direct with their commerce and selling their games or their in-app purchases or their digital goods or subscriptions, whatever it might be, but anything that you would need to run your games business. And then through our unique business model, we actually function as the merchant of record. So not only do we provide all of this great coverage globally for your commerce business, that means a lot of the payments, login systems, launchers, all of that. But because we are merchant of record, we actually are able to handle all of the taxes, the VAT, the compliance, customer support, all of that backroom stuff that you need when you're operating a games business directly with your players. And that gives everybody it lets our partners focus on making great games, and it lets their players get great support when they are engaging with those games. And as we'll talk about today, we're growing far beyond commerce as well. We really are looking at providing all of those tools that you would need. If you have a great game engine that you've built your game on and you want to distribute and connect directly with your players, then we're going to help you with that.
Brian, I'm just thinking this is all about the business of games. So it has evolved and so has Xsolla over, I didn't realize that, 18 years? Do I feel slightly dated here?
Yes, we've been around for a while. We are over 800 people globally. We have offices all over the world, and we help thousands of games reach players everywhere. And we truly have global coverage, not just with the commerce, but we're getting into back-end technologies, marketing and user acquisition technologies, as well as some business to consumer, some actual direct to player offerings as well. And we work with companies, some of the biggest companies in the world, both on PC and mobile, but also lots and lots of independent developers. So we really are agnostic when it comes to the size of the business. We really feel our goal is to help you fulfill your dreams and offload a lot of that back end business kind of overhead that you have to deal with when you're trying to run your game business, so that our partners can really focus on making great games and making great connections with their players.
You see, that speaks to me quite a lot, Chris, because I go back little more than 18 years, and it's been very clear when we get out to a lot of the events that we go to, when we speak to some of our audience, our listeners, our readers. So many developers want to concentrate on the fundamentals, making a great game, the design, the development, the technical aspect. And while there's a lot of discussion around the game engines, so the tools of creation, it seems as though the tools for success, monetization, engagement get an awful lot less attention. Maybe they're not quite as sexy, but they're absolutely vital. And when you look at some of the key challenges facing studios out there right now, it is all of the business side of things. User acquisition, monetization, lifetime value, engagement. So it's great to hear that you're sort of consolidating and pulling things together in a one place that can be accessed regardless of the size of studio.
Absolutely. And, that really speaks to some of the trends that we're seeing now in regards to the business around games. We've gone through these different stages of game distribution where, you'll remember this since you've been in the industry a while as well. It's good to see a fellow veteran. But, back in the day, it was really all about that retail, that sort of packaged goods model. And a lot of as a publisher, or sorry, as a developer, you really had to work with a publisher that had those retail connections, who could pay the upfront fees to get the discs printed or the cartridges, whatever it may have been. And then we kind of evolved into digital distribution. That's where we started to see more of these third-party platforms come online, like Steam or the app stores. And those were really great offerings for game developers because they had the audience at scale. And it was very easy, or it is very easy, to publish your game through a third-party platform. And they continue to be great resources for people to get their games out there. But we're kind of we've entered a third stage now. We had the retail, the third-party platforms. Well, now we're really seeing the opportunity for developers to go directly to their players and sell their games or distribute their games direct to them outside of these third-party platforms. And that's kind of coincided with the value proposition from those third-party platforms starting to decline as they've become oversaturated. At the same time, the lifetime value of players has continued to grow as we shift more and more into forever games, whether it's a live ops game or it's a premium game with ongoing DLC, or it's a subscription-based offering, whatever it might be. We're finding that players are sticking with games longer and their value is going up. Well, the issue there is if it's harder to get discovered for your game, and then once you are discovered, it's costing you more to get that player to discover you, and the value of that player is higher than ever. The disconnect is you're handing that player over to a third-party platform in the current environment, and you're giving that third-party platform the long tail of value from that player. You've done all the hard work to get them into your game, and now you hand them over to the platform. And what we're seeing a trend of is publishers and developers are really looking at their margins now and realizing, it actually is more cost effective in a lot of cases to acquire those players directly ourselves and keep them within our own ecosystem, right? And not only do we then maximize the lifetime value of that player, but we actually get all of the data around them. There's a lot of information lost to you when your player comes through a third-party platform, where if you work with companies like ourselves, you actually get that data, right? That's your own data. You get a complete picture, not only of what they're doing in your game, but how they're transacting with your game and their life within your own platform.
You are right. They are also getting data. I'm curious, is that data that developers are understanding? It's not only their first party data, but it also allows them, if they so choose, to really start thinking about either collaborating with other games companies or finding a way to ultimately unlock that for admon, because that's what brands want. They want to understand that you understand your audience.
You're absolutely right, Peggy. And not going to knock on any of the third-party platforms, but there's a lot of talk of privacy, and we're doing this for the benefit of the, our audience or our consumers. Well, the reality is they're just creating more of a walled garden around the data that they control, right? Which at the end of the day is the data that belongs to the game developers. It's your players. They're in there. You don't know what payment options they're using, when, maybe some of the more detailed information around the commerce and their behavior and what other things they've purchased, what they like to purchase across not only your game, but if you have a portfolio of games, over many games. So there's really an incomplete picture that you're not getting. And under the guise of privacy, some of these third-party platforms are retaining that for themselves, which you're absolutely right, Peggy. They're then flipping around and using that to give them an advantage, perhaps over their own ad network, right? As opposed to something that you could use as a publisher or developer to kind of take advantage of that yourself and get more value for you. You're the ones making the game. You kind of deserve that.
I want to pick up on that in terms of the data as well, because it's one of these areas that is relatively new for developers. And so does Xsolla offer any kind of route in to data, the use of data analytics and really how you benefit as a studio, as a developer, if you haven't yet started down that journey?
It's a great question, Brian. So we always, full caveat, we always respect the privacy and the data of our partners, and that's our partners' data, right? Even though it comes through our system, we don't treat it as our own. Having said that, within our publisher account, which is kind of the portal that if you're working with us, you access everything through your publisher account, we do provide a robust set of data sort of tracking and visualization and analytics options there so that you can really get a good picture of that. And then our account managers and our business development team are always available to help you if you have questions to go even deeper. We have done a partnership we announced previously with company Apps Flyer, which also provides even more, right, of an overview. And with them, you can connect your game and your commerce data, right, to get a robust picture. So this is an area that we're continuing to expand on. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at ways of growing the offerings beyond just the commerce piece of it. So being able to provide connections either through our publisher account or through strategic partnerships that allow our partners to really not only see their data, but analyze it and take advantage of it is very important to us.
That makes sense. And what I'm hearing, Peggy, is that it's not so much about ownership, it's about increasing that engagement across the spectrum, from your user acquisition all the way through, your players. And so many of the developers, so many of the game creators, publishers we speak to, Chris, are all about it's the engagement. We need to know what people want. We need to keep them happy. We can build a great game, but how do we know that the players are kind of getting what we're putting out there? And you're giving them that opportunity from beginning to end. And Peggy, is this something, because you are our user acquisition, our monetization expert on the team, is this something that the developers are kind of recognizing as having real value?
Absolutely, because the options are different now. With a privacy first landscape, it makes you look at alternatives. So before, Chris, it was possible to go alternate ways and look at alternate routes, but it was a lot of heavy lifting. And I get the feeling that the reason you're doing what you're doing is because you're looking at it and saying, this time around, because we've been talking about alternative app stores and monetization now for, a decade. This time around, it's for real.
Absolutely. And, the case in point, the defining moment that really makes this real, not just, somebody out there with a vested interest talking about it, but next year we have finally something going into effect in Europe called the Digital Markets Act. And the whole point of that is to try to help open up these platforms so that the people creating content can actually truly benefit from the content that they have created. So There's a whole bunch of things that regulations within the Digital Markets Act, DMA, but the couple of things that really stand out that apply to the app stores like the Apple App Store and a number of other platforms. One is they will be forced to allow side loading of apps. And what that means is that if you're a game company, you can actually put your app up on your website and players could go there and download it directly to their device. So that would be side loading. Another thing that it opens up is third-party app stores within the App Store. So at least from my understanding, it would allow something like the Epic Games Store to go inside of the App Store. So this is really a foundational shift and a huge, no longer are the sort of the walled gardens crumbling. This is like a huge crack in the wall, right? This is a big opening where developers and publishers can start to take much more direct control of what's happening on the mobile landscape within, the apps business. And this does apply to other platforms, but for here we can talk, I think, more about mobile games because I think that's the topic of interest. And we are really excited about this because if you're a publisher or developer who wants to sideload or do a third-party app store, that's exactly what we do. We provide everything you would need to do that.
As someone who's watched this from the start, Chris, as someone who's seen it from day one in your business, in your passion, in your hobby, and in your company, I can't help but hear a little bit of rooting there. That's like, yeah, it's going to happen, and the developers are going to have their day now.
Absolutely, and that is just incredibly exciting to me because of course it benefits the big companies and they get to increase their margins, expand their reach, all of that. That's fantastic. Love that. But what's really great is for a lot of the independent developers, this starts to give them much more power and control. Everything from not having to pay as big of a margin, right, on their business, but more importantly, and we could talk about this with what we're seeing with these web shops that we do, the ability to actually extend your reach and connect with new players that you aren't. What a lot of people may be surprised to find out, there's a lot of players out there that you actually cannot reach through some of these third-party platforms due to the limited options they have around the payment side of things. So great way to grow the business. And what that means is more independent games, more great games will actually be able to find enough of an audience to sustain the developers, which brings more fresh ideas into the business, which is a win for everybody.
That's a great point, Chris, and a great point, Peggy. And I think for developers, it seems as though the options are opening up. It's your business model, your revenue is becoming a design choice in the same way that the genre, the art style. And that's putting so much more power back into the hands of the creators.
I've talked about this for a long time as well, that one of the best ways to sort of succeed with your games business as a smaller developer or an independent developer, I mean, really any size, but is for the indies, it's really that ability to build a community, right? And connect directly with players. And through the ability now to transact or do commerce directly with them, that allows you to maximize, the value there, because maybe your audience is, maybe it's in tens of thousands of players, right? As opposed to the millions or whatever. But if you can add a few more players to that or a few more percentage points on your margin through a better, more favorable business model, that can mean the difference between succeeding or failing. And, I love that, right? Who doesn't want to help people succeed with their dreams?
What does that mean for developers in emerging markets then, Chris? If you have a lot of areas where the banking system is different or people don't have access to credit cards, charge cards, is this going to, take gaming into places that it's not yet established? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. And we've seen that firsthand. We are integrated with hundreds of different payment methods worldwide. There are markets where 30-40% of the players do not have, what we would consider a traditional payment method, one of the big three, credit cards or PayPal. And these players are quite literally unable to transact within your game. We see that in places like India, Brazil. People are wondering what's going on in these markets. Well, they're huge markets, but the players there just use different forms of payment that really are not connected in to these platforms. So it's very easy to just think, oh, okay, there's no players in these markets. The reality is they're huge markets, and you're just not able to transact with them through these platforms. So that's another example of the power of, okay. And by the way, I always encourage people to be on a platform because they have amazing reach, right? Huge audiences, but there's no reason to not also do your own direct, proposition, either in your current market or to expand into some of these markets where maybe the coverage is a bit more limited.
I also like that analogy with retail, because it's the same as if you have a shop. You have a shop, you have a shop on the corner, you don't mind being in the mall because maybe they have more footfall, but the whole point is that you have control over what you're doing. And that's a great way to talk about how you're facilitating this right now, Chris, because I have to say, a slew of releases. When I looked at it, I was like, boy, you've been busy. You don't just release one thing. We've got 5 and counting in a very short period of time. Maybe you want to start by walking us through. We'll start with the web shop, because that was the way of reaching totally new players. Incremental value is always good. What does that enable?
So our web shop is something that we launched about almost 2 years ago now, and it has been a huge success for our partners. What it does is it allows mobile games to create an online presence, a web presence, and really engage directly with their players. And it's much more than just simply moving your store over to the web, which is part of it, right? So the way it works is a player can go to your web shop and they can actually purchase things within that shop, whether it's your in-game currency or special items or whatever it might be. And then that is fulfilled or shows up within your app. There's a couple of big benefits of that. One, from a revenue standpoint, there's a difference in the margins where a platform might charge 15 to 30% of each transaction. We actually charge 5% and plus the credit card fee or whatever the payment fee is. So maybe another 1 or 2%. And so right there's a benefit where you're getting a margin lift just on the charge, but it's much, much more than that. If it was just that, it would probably fail, right? What we're actually seeing happen is these web shops are becoming online hubs and destinations for players. And our partners are doing, video updates, developer diaries, getting a sense of community going around these web shops. And the name of the game there is it creates a better value proposition for your players where they can go somewhere, get additional information, they can get special offers. One thing people don't realize with the app stores is the amount of sort of cool e-commerce things you can do is also very limited. So it's not just the payment options, which are limited, but it's the things you can do around bundles and promotions and special offers and behavioral pricing and all of the things, really treating your shop like a live ops, element in and of itself. A lot of things that are difficult to do within the app stores, you can actually do on your web shop. So you're able to connect more directly with players. User acquisition is much easier because you now have the power of the whole web and social media and all of that to go acquire users. So there's less restrictions there. You can use redirects to get people back. There's a whole host of things you can do. And what we're seeing is because of all of this, we're seeing we have over 150 web shops now that are up and running. We work with 40 out of the top 100 mobile companies out there. We're helping them with their web shops. And we're seeing that these web shops are generating, in some cases, 45 cents in a web shop for every dollar generated within the app store, because you can really personalize the offerings. You can use e-commerce. You have a better relationship with the players. You can put things up quicker, and it's just fantastic. The data I mentioned, you can actually leverage your data to improve the web shop experience, the purchase experience. So it's fantastic. This is really a strong area of growth. We've seen for mid-core titles, the average sort of revenue per paying user increase by 4 times, and with core games up to 8 times the revenue per paying user. The number of users converting to payers, from players to payers, has increased dramatically within these web shops because of all of the alternative payments, right, that are now available. So it's just a great way to grow your mobile business.
And one of the other things that you are also seeing is the player journey up front. So I'm assuming that has some input into what you've just launched, which is about the checkout. Whoever thought that that was going to be important, but that also needs to be customized. And that's what you're doing.
It really does, Peggy. And we've just released an update to our PayStation product, which allows you to do something called headless checkout. And it really is the culmination of providing the most customizable experience to our partners, who then can pass that on to their players. So the checkout point is critical, and it's something we all take for granted. Again, we want our partners to focus on making a great game. But from a player's perspective, the checkout is a really important piece of their experience. And too often what happens is we all just use whatever UI or UX comes with the whatever payment system we've plugged into our game, right? And usually that creates some sort of ugly pop-up that appears. It really takes the players out of the experience. It breaks the fantasy, right, that they're engaged in with the game. So we felt it was really important to create what we call the headless checkout. And that allows our partners to fully customize this checkout experience with their own UI from their game, so that to a player, this just feels like another natural piece of the game. The interface isn't broken. They're not taken out of the game. They're kept within that experience. So if you have a beautiful style, unique style to your game, to your UI and UX within your game, you can now apply that to your checkout. And why, like you said, Peggy, who would have thought this is even important? Well, I'll give you some data points around why it is. We find that 70% on average, 70% of e-commerce carts are abandoned. And what does that mean? That means somebody has said, hey, click, I want to buy something. And then it goes to a cart, and then you check out. Well, somewhere in there, the flow just is disrupted for the player, and they just abandon the cart, right? And that's a lot of lost opportunity. And often that's because they're disconnected from the game itself. And, now you can personalize that. You can put, game UI and game characters in there that can help, encourage people to move along through that flow. 77% of consumers believe that a customized experience within their checkout is important, that they're more inclined to transact and complete these transactions if it feels like a natural part of their experience. 65% of consumers trust a good UX more than advertising. So, you can spend all this money trying to force people into the top of the funnel, but if the UX is not good, they're going to be, just leaking out, right? Flowing out. And you can really close that off by using headless checkout to create a customized experience.
The list of new additions keeps on coming, Chris. So can you tell us a little more about Accelerator? This sounds incredibly interesting.
Absolutely. So Accelerate XR is a new acquisition. It's a great team that recently has joined us, and they're coming on board to help us build out a whole new section of what we offer. So we've talked about commerce. Well, we now also are building out back-end services. So cross-play, leaderboards, all kinds of back-end, whatever you would need to really do a games business across multiple platforms. We're building that out. And Accelerate XR joined us just recently, and they bring a team that has a whole host of different systems, including live cloud scripting. And it's a feature-packed platform that really helps you expand your business through cross-play and cross-pay solutions. And we didn't stop there. We also have acquired another company called Lightstream. So where Accelerate XR is helping us going cross-platform, cross-play, some back-end technologies. With Lightstream, that's helping us with streaming for content creators to basically quickly get up and running and stream their games through a Lightstream integration. It's also part of Rainmaker and API Stream. And these really revolutionize the landscape for content creation and distribution and plug into our overall offering. And then because we have something already called Partner Network that this plugs into, we now really easily allow game companies to work with influencers and content creators at scale, posting campaigns. The content creators can go online, pick a campaign, and then use Lightstream to get up and running and streaming quickly. And then we handle all of the attribution of how successful that is, the payouts for, paying the content creators for driving users. So, I talked early on about web shop and commerce. I talked about sort of the payment side of it, Accelerate XR with the backend services and the crossplay and all of that. Lightstream and Partner Network and Rainmaker is all part of our helping companies with the marketing and the user acquisition. And then I think we'll talk about probably the last thing on the agenda today, which is our Xsolla Mall, helping us go direct to consumer, business to consumer, as opposed to business.
Yeah, well, you brought it up, Chris, so please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So the final thing is Xsolla Mall. And all the other stuff I've talked about is great if you're running a game company and you're a game developer or publisher. Well, Xsolla Mall is something that speaks directly to the players. It's a new mall, a new marketplace that it's not a marketplace, it's much more than that. It's a mall that offers all these things. You can get games directly, you can get additional bonus content, there's all kinds of special offers. Influencers have their own unique pages to promote campaigns up there. There's cloud games you can play. So, it's really a mall, everything under one roof, and allows us to build up a direct player community, which is really exciting.
You connect the dots in all of this, and you're building quite a powerhouse, is what I'm thinking here, Chris, because there's nothing like social shopping. We saw that works. We've seen that work in Eastern countries. It's coming to the West, and now you've got it here as well.
You're absolutely right, Peggy. And I'm really glad you mentioned that. It is a trend that we've seen really working well in the East. This whole idea of social shopping and being able to, you have your super apps, you have all these other things, but a destination for players where they can get everything under one roof. And it's a huge trend. And we really, our goal is to provide this for our partners, but also to start building up a community there that our partners can leverage. And it's a win for them and it's a win for the players. And, that makes us happy. So.
Well, this is all about happiness, Chris, isn't it? You want happy developers, the developers want happy players, and the players want, fast, easy, convenient access to the games they love when and where they choose to engage. So that's incredible. I mean, that's not a platform, it's not an engine, that's an ecosystem in its own right. So that's quite some undertaking.
Thank you. Well, we've got a great team, and our team, like I said, is dedicated purely to games. We are all game players as well, and many game developers are within the company. We eat and breathe games, and just want this whole sort of industry to keep succeeding and growing.
So, Chris, nobody gets off this podcast without answering a couple of questions. And given that you are a self-confessed gamer and have been doing this for a little while now, we have two questions. One is, what's the game that you're playing right now? What's obsessing you at the moment? And then the one that requires a bit more pondering is what's your favorite game of all time?
Ooh, okay. So the game that I'm playing now, which has turned into my forever game, I've been playing it consistently almost every day for a few years now, is Apex Legends. So I've been on that emotional roller coaster as this game has evolved and developed, and I've become more of that sort of older cohort player, but I still love it, and I play that game every day or almost every day for probably too much time, a few hours each evening. So my favorite game of all time, and I'm going to say a favorite franchise because I love all the game. I am a sucker for any game that comes out as part of this franchise, but it is Warhammer 40,000. So my first job in the industry was with Games Workshop, grew up playing the games, hardcore fan. Any Warhammer 40,000 game that comes out, I am in. So currently I'm ready to play the Rogue Trader game. I've got that pre-ordered and I'm ready to dive into that. I just have to peel myself away from Apex a little bit to be able to do that.
It's always it's always a problem where you've got something that you're playing, but there's a new game coming out, and you're like, but I have to put this one down. See, nobody appreciates how hard gamers have it. They really
Right.
don't. But it's that's a great answer. If I had to put money on something, I don't think I would have gone with Warhammer. But huge respect. That Chris, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate the opportunity.
I have to say, I appreciate the opportunity because now I have a different understanding of what you're doing and connecting those dots. So I have to watch this. We have to watch this, Brian.
We know that our audience includes a lot of developers, and we know that there are a lot of developers out there that are looking for the edge, their next thing, and how they sort of take their games and their passion forward into the future. So, yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we get a lot of requests from people going, can you get that guy back on and get him to talk about Warhammer more often? So just be prepared, Chris.
Absolutely. Anytime.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PGBiz, and you can reach out to us through the pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future. Until then, I'm Brian Baglow.
I'm Peggy Ann Saltz, and that's a wrap until next week.